Inflation is just a gaslit number. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainsley Insights, brought to you by Ainsley Bullion, Ainsley Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard as the Ainsley Group celebrates 50 years. Today, welcome back Alex, who's been questioning what the real rate of inflation actually is. Probably nothing like the published official numbers we see all the time. How are you going today, Alex?
I'm going very well. How are you?
I'm good. Now, this is a topic it's one that's close to both of our hearts because we discuss this, and I don't think we're the only ones that discuss it. I think this is around the dinner table. I think this is around the water cooler at work. People are talking about inflation and how the real numbers don't seem to match what we hear. What you really highlighted today in the article raised a lot of discussion. This idea from Larry Summers that the true rate of inflation is probably around 18%. Now, that's much higher than the official figures. Can you explain to us what is going on?
So today the RBA release, or not the RBA, that we got the Australian CPI figures, which are creeping up again. No surprise to everyone at the dinner table and around the cooler. But so we're now at 3.6%. I would say the RBA would be pretty worried about whether or not they're going to raise on the next interest rate decision.
Hmm.
It's starting to look like it's chasing higher. And let's just talk about how 3.6 seems incredibly light on to what everyone else is feeling at the moment. Budgets have tightened more than 3.6%. I believe millennials' spending is around down 7%. So on good for good basis. So 3.6 is not where it is. It's probably closer to 7 or 8%. But the numbers keep saying 3.6, 4.1, 2.8, like they're low. So Larry Summers, who was the head of Treasury between 1999 and 2001 in the US, did a paper recently with Harvard University, and a whole heap of other economists had some input into it. But basically, they have said real inflation is at 18%, and the reason is in 1983 we swapped, or the US swapped rent for mortgage payments, and it never came back. And over time, as mortgage payments and rent, for that matter, make up more and more of the basket of the goods, the impact became greater. And now the differential is so big between the two of them that the fact that mortgage payments are probably crept up 5 times, whereas rent's only doubled, means that inflation is now much less than where it should be. Part of the article also spoke about substitution and how economists in the Bureau are able to sort of make some judgment calls and substitute what they feel they would like to substitute at the time. And over time, this inflation number over the last 40 years does not reflect what it's really been, but it's becoming more and more exaggerated, particularly because of rent and mortgage payments just making up so much more of the basket, around 25% plus. Whereas in Australia, mortgage payments, as we know, are much higher percent of your budget. They're not 25%.
Yeah. Not even close. And it's really interesting to me when you make that comparison from what they did in 1983 to say, we'll just pull your home mortgage payments out, we'll put rental rates in, that those sort of levels of substitution even are necessary, that you really think, well, it shouldn't be something that you need to do. And you look at it particularly in the modern age where we've got mechanisms in place that we could see the real-time movement of prices across a whole range, like everything really. You shouldn't really need people sitting in these centralized positions who are just playing with the numbers to suit whatever the purpose is on any given day. That shouldn't be necessary.
Probably suits whoever is paying their bills.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were talking about before, you've got substitution, so they're able to do that. You've got the rent versus mortgage payments, they're able to do that. And then everyone at the moment talks about shrinkflation, and we were talking about that my goat's cheese has gone from 100 grams to 80 grams. And have they taken into account shrinkflation? Probably not. It's probably
they
just
probably
the
just say
same
goat
goat's
cheese is the
cheese.
same. Yeah, exactly. Like they
So
probably don't take that into account at all.
yeah, so it's just another way to hide the inflation that has and is running rampant, but the exaggeration is just getting bigger and bigger, and that's probably why people are feeling it more and more.
So let's talk about a specific example that you mentioned in the article, McDonald's, right? That's one that everyone can understand. the price of, I mean, The Economist uses that Big Mac index where they go, well, this is what a price of one Big Mac costs around the world to sort of judge movements in inflation across different countries. But what's your take on this McDonald's story?
So one of the examples from the article today was the Big Mac. Apparently, it's since the 1980s has shrunk 40%, and the price has gone from 50 cents to $8. So that's 16 times. Throw in some shrinkflation as well. We're probably running at 20 times. The price has gone up 20 times, whereas inflation is only saying 5 times. So it's an astronomical difference. But this is what Chris and I were talking about this before. The reason McDonald's is the most relevant is because they are ultimately a real estate company. Everyone knows that McDonald's buys the land, leases the land to their franchisees, and that's predominantly how they make their money. So if you look at the Big Mac, it's probably the most appropriate way to add back in the mortgage payments that got stripped back out, because McDonald's is not going to just rent it out over time. They're going to increase it with their mortgage payments or with whatever they've paid for it, their capital. So if they're at 20 times and the what has been stated over 40 years is at 5 times, you can see that there's been a huge and gradual change in what's going on, and it's just not being recorded, it's not being seen, and you can argue that, you know, is there any sense in it that the government wants inflation down, and they're paying the bills for the Bureau of Statistics that are telling everyone that it's down?
Well, let's dig into that a little more, because obviously there's political bias coming in here, and that's, you know, the title was gaslighting, and that seems to be what's going on there. Ultimately, this undermines public trust at some point, and I think you probably agree. We're coming to that point now where we're going, well, people really aren't believing the numbers anymore. You might have got away with that, and you just use the McDonald's example. You might have got away with it because it's gradual, and it's been going up over time. You just don't really notice it, but now people are noticing it. Do you think that ultimately this forces a change in behavior from the Bureau, like of Statistics there, or from their bosses making these decisions? Is a change in behavior coming, or do they really just need to push this as far as they possibly can, because that they don't really have a lot of options here?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the reason it's been pushed to this point is because rates have had to rapidly rise because of the amount of money, the fiscal spending. And the reason the difference has become so big is back to that monetary thing where the interest rate rises are actually causing more and more inflation now, and they're not being recorded, they're not being acknowledged. And so the differential between what you think inflation is and what the government telling you inflation is getting worse and worse. And it basically happens when there's a rapid increase in asset prices. Back in 2009 or 2008, when we had the global financial crisis and assets fell, that was when CPI actually would have overstated things. So it is the rapidness of the asset price increases that are manifesting itself through interest rate rises to try and control things in inflation. And right now, the gaslighting worked until it was so rapid. So you've got Biden right now, I think it was yesterday, got up and said, when I came into power, inflation was at 9.1%, and it wasn't. It was at 1.4%. So that it's just like, why does everyone keep making stuff up? And you've got Albanese, who promised to drop energy prices, now giving us $300 back, which he says is going to help inflation. And we spoke about that last week. It is not going to help inflation. It is just a tool to manipulate the data. So like you said, there's plenty of ways, like going to McDonald's and going and buying a Big Mac, that people will know what inflation is. And just the discontent out there right now with the government telling you one thing when you know it's something else is growing. And the exaggeration is harder and harder to gaslight it.
Yep. Well, it seems like it will continue for the time being, at least. But maybe there's a glimmer of hope on the horizon that at some point there's a focus back on rebuilding public trust in these numbers and realigning what we hear and what we feel, because ultimately has to be the path forward, because people won't put up with that forever. That would be sort of my conclusion on that.
Oh, we've put up with it for 40 years. Like,
Yeah,
I
but
know.
at some point, right? So maybe, hopefully not another 40 years until we go, okay, we need to get this back in line. Maybe I'm just an optimist.
Oh, you know what? Everything's good until it breaks, and then something has to fix it. So, a lot of things look like they're breaking at the moment. So, a lot of things are going to have to be fixed.
Well, we'll leave it on that note. Thank you for your work on that today, Alex. Really interesting topic. I really love that one. So thanks for your work.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.